Welcome to the Podski. What? Ooh, yeah.
You understand, baby?
Dig it?
Let me tell you another thing.
First name John, last name Baker. Uh-huh. Brother.
Hello and welcome to the Podski. I'm your host, the man of 1,000 gimmicks, John Baker. And today we got Allison back on the show for another documentary review. And this one is a difficult one. And it's a difficult one because of the subject matter. So we're going to be reviewing the Casey Anthony documentary that is on Peacock. It is a 3-part documentary. It's a pretty quick watch as far as time, but it is a difficult watch in that it's really hard to hear about because we already know, like, we already have feelings towards Casey, and we already have like a lot of emotions and feelings about the case and what happened, and it's really hard to sit and watch it just listening to what these people have to say 10 years later, and bringing it all back up again. So it's not gruesome or gory like type of difficult to watch, but it's just difficult to hear these types of things. So kind of wanted to get that out of the way before we get into this, but I want to thank all you listeners for checking out last week's show. Last week we looked into the AEW roster, the men's section of that roster. We're not going to be doing that this week, so if you were looking for that, I apologize. But we will be doing that next week. We're going to take it a look. We're going to finish off the roster. We're going to check out the women's division with Andretti. We're going to take some looks at some other things within AEW, too, because some things have happened since last week in AEW, and a lot more things are going to continue to happen. So I want to keep everyone updated on that. Hopefully you checked out That's So Dolphins Talk this past weekend. We're going to be coming back at you with another video this weekend. Yes, we really thought the world was melting, and we did a lot of mental gymnastics to make ourselves feel better in our little therapy session on Sunday. But I look at that game a lot differently now, and I don't think it's quite as bad as what we made it out to be. So we're looking forward to the game this Sunday with the Chargers, and we got a huge game in 2 weeks against the Bills. So there are primetime games out of the ordinary for the Dolphins, but we're really excited about that. So hopefully you're checking out That's So Dolphins Talk, and you're checking out all of our other archive shows. And don't forget to download, rate, review, and subscribe. Check us out on Twitter at @the_Podski. Check us out on Instagram at @the_Podski, and check us out on Facebook at The Podski with John Baker. We're on all of the podcasting platforms, so check us out, interact with us. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about this documentary. Let us know about anything Dolphins related, definitely wrestling related. We got a lot of cool things lined up. Did some planning earlier this week for our holiday show coming up in a few weeks, and for some things in the future that we're really excited about. So stay tuned. We got a lot of good things coming for you, and let's get into the Casey Anthony documentary. Today we have Allison is back with us again for another documentary review. Allison, how you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
All right. Well, we have a really interesting documentary today. One that I know that we've previously watched them before, not really thinking that we would get this kind of documentary. It would be Casey Anthony's actual side of her story of what happened, and it is a new documentary. It's on Peacock. It's very big news, so I'm sure when you go to Peacock, you can find it very easily. It's Casey Anthony.
Where the Truth Lies.
Yeah, Where the Truth Lies, which is a very interesting title for it. It couldn't be picked. They couldn't have picked a better title, personally.
I'd say the opposite, actually, because I feel like all the other documentaries up until this point have been one side of it, where she's guilty, and that's that, and nothing else. And then this one is supposed to be Where the Truth Lies, but it's only her side, and that's it. Like, they don't really dive super far into both sides, and to me, the truth always lies in the middle. And so to call this Where the Truth Lies is not true, because I don't think that that was fully the truth. And regardless, the truth never lies on one side. It always lies in the middle, especially with cases like this.
I took it as a play on with words where the truth lies, because she, as we will get into it in the future here, and Casey does a lot of lying, and
Oh, yeah.
it's really hard to tell when, like, she does tell the truth, but whenever she's speaking, there's only a very small kernel of truth. It's like literally picking a needle out of the haystack, and that's the truth of what she's saying, and it's really hard to figure that out.
I like that. Yeah.
So that's why I thought it was a great play on words.
I think it would have been better as a question. Where does the truth lie? Like, I think that would have been a better, more accurate description of what you're going to get.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that it is 3 episodes. I'm surprised. It felt a smidge long for me, personally. I felt that the first episode dragged a little bit, and then once they got into the second episode, they kind of gave you a little bit more, but then in the third episode is when they kind of really gave it to you, and you're just like, whoa, like it was almost too much to take in for that hour.
In my opinion, if you go into it thinking she is guilty and that's that, and no one else played a part, you probably won't make it past the first episode, because I went into it with an open mind and I almost didn't make it past the first episode, because all I felt like it was her saying, I lied. And like, we already know that. We know you lie. And so to me, I was like, why am I watching this? Because she's supposed to be telling the truth, and all she's talking about is how much she lied.
Correct. And, we should up front say that we both, whenever you asked me to watch this with you, we both looked at each other and we both said, we're going into this with an open mind. Like, we're not going to make a decision right now, even though it's really, really hard not to. But we were going to see it the whole way through and then make our assumption or make our conclusions at the end. And I want to give credit up front to the people that made this documentary. They did a really good job of trying to manipulate you and push you in a certain way to make you think a certain way. And they definitely did that at the end. I will say that. Now, after you're done watching and you want to sit back, it's one of those documentaries where when you watch it, you need to take a second and sit back and think on it before you kind of jump.
But at the same time, like, the fact that they were so good at getting her side of it is also my downfall with it, because like, the way they filmed it was a little manipulating, and I didn't like that. Like, that bothered me, because if they actually think that she's telling the truth, there's no need to put on that type of a show and make it so obvious that they think that she's completely innocent.
Yeah. And it came out, now that I'm thinking more about the third episode, when they're giving the details about her father and all that, when you get to the end, they really were manipulating you and really making you think that Casey was innocent. Like, sure, like her verdict was true and all of that. And kudos to them for doing that and pulling that emotion out of you. But like, you should not saying you should go into this thinking one way, but have an open mind with everything, obviously, but don't pigeonhole yourself and don't allow yourself to get sucked in.
It seems, though, that the general consensus is nobody thinks that they did a good job of us feeling like bad for her. Like, I don't feel like a lot of people feel that way. Like, from what I'm reading online, no one's convinced. And it's almost too dramatic that's why they're not convinced, because it's very much, here's the main issue I had with it. It's so much playing on the fact that she's a victim, and they totally missed the point of who the victim really is. That's what bothered me. I do think that Casey is a victim to certain things, but I don't think that she is the victim of this situation and of what happened. She's just not.
Right. And I guess I should frame it a little bit differently. Like they did a good job of it. They manipulated you in the moment. I guess is a better like. Once I sat back and I thought about it like afterwards, I was like,
Yeah.
that is pretty like
Yeah. Yeah, they did.
they didn't.
I had to go back and watch like old documentaries on the other side to like refresh my memory because it was kind of like when they would get to a point where like they couldn't explain her side of it, they just kind of cut it off and like,
It was
let's go over here.
Yeah,
Like,
they left things vague and on purpose
because they needed it to fit their narrative,
Right.
which is partly what bothered me. Because if you're trying to tell the truth, you tell all of it. You don't
Correct.
just tell some of it to
Right.
fit in the box that you want it to fit in.
Right. No, I agree. And one of the things that I felt this documentary starts bizarre and it ends even more bizarre, which is the whole thing was bizarre because I felt like this is something that shouldn't have been brought up ever again, and where they're bringing it up because this now Casey's ready to give her side of the story, and I just wasn't. I didn't think we needed to do that.
And I think a lot of people have that opinion. Like, I think a lot of people are like, really? Like, why are you giving her a voice? But at the same time, like, those are the same people that were so mad that she disappeared. Like, oh, she's guilty because she went and disappeared and fell into a hole and no one's heard from her. So, like, I see both sides. Like, I see why it needed to be done, and then I see why it should have just been let alone.
After watching this and seeing a little bit of the backlash, not a little bit, it's been a lot of it's all backlash. This is something that I'm sure, like in the moment, they probably thought was a really great idea. Them being Casey and her legal team and all that, they probably thought this was a great idea, but this is like not what you want. This is the bad.
It's not the reaction they wanted.
It's not the reaction they wanted. It might be worse.
Well, and I think that is partly because they were so dramatic in their viewpoint. They were so careful in the way they painted Casey that it made people really mad.
The perception of her appearance.
She was very groomed. She was
very groomed, and she really
they wanted to do a lot to portray her as a lonely mom who misses her kid.
Filming her single, like just her alone in the car,
with all of the pictures
and the pictures of her as a kid.
Because I wanted to know, like, all the pictures that she brought in, are those actually up in her house? Do you know what I mean? Like all the pictures that she brought in, she's like, I'm never without these. Like these are the most important things. I'm like, but are they really? Because like if they were, you wouldn't set. You just here's my that goes there. There my clothes go here, and my toothbrush goes here. Like I just felt like it was so exaggerated, and that's where they went wrong because it's like you're not going to convince people of that part of it. So just let it go. Like put that away. And that's where I think what you were saying, it didn't need to be 3 episodes, but they milked that part of it so much, and it annoyed people.
It's almost like I think that they thought it's been 10 years. You've probably forgotten. So let's reintroduce her. And they tried to do this reintroducing, and they just did it way over the top. That was just way too...
too far the other way of what she was when it happened.
Correct.
Which is why it seemed like a lie.
Right, from the beginning.
Yeah.
I want to dive into the flaws of this case, because this whole documentary is based around the case, and obviously they do a deep dive into like with her legal team, which I'm gonna take a second and talk about the legal team here in a second, because I felt that was so strange to me that her and her legal team are just sitting around at a dinner on it looked like a Sunday dinner.
What, in the dock?
Yeah, that felt insanely bizarre to me, because like how many of these documentaries have we watched where that's a thing? I've never seen
but their argument was because she doesn't have anybody, which again that makes sense for what they were trying to do in the documentary. They were trying to make her look like extremely lonely, and she has no family because they needed to make the family the enemy, her actual family. So I understood why they did it that way.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking about that during, but so into the case, there's a common theme that we always follow with any of these documentaries is that there's always flaws in the case. So what are some of the flaws that you thought were really noticeable as you're watching it?
Yeah, so in the case itself, the prosecution, I think, because of how they looked at Casey and they were like, this is a mother who doesn't care that her kid's gone. They built their case on such little evidence that was their number one mistake from the beginning. And like everybody blames, the jury. That's like what you hear and what you heard then. It was the jury went wrong, but they really didn't. The prosecution went wrong in what they charged. There was extreme reasonable doubt for first-degree murder. Manslaughter? Probably not.
Mhm.
Like, I could definitely see a guilty verdict with manslaughter.
Mhm.
But first-degree murder, you just can't because there's too many missing pieces, and the prosecution didn't do anything to fill in those gaps. Plus, their star witness, George Anthony, her dad, also lied. And he went back and forth on things, and her defense team caught him in multiple lies. So, like, they built their case on crumbs. Like, and they thought, and this is where I think where their issues lie, they think that because we think it, everybody else will think it. And we don't really have to try that hard.
Yeah.
And it doesn't compute. It doesn't work like that, obviously, which is why the result was what it was. I don't feel like once they saw Casey and once they found out she was lying, they were like, all right, that's our girl. We're good. We're done. We're not going to question anything else. And case closed.
And one of the things that you said there about beyond a shadow of a doubt, one of the quotes that I heard post watching this was that Casey is really good at casting you or letting you know that you have to make a decision beyond a shadow of a doubt for the first degree murder, but they're extremely good at casting that shadow of doubt as well. So I thought that was a really interesting quote that I heard that, obviously when you're dealing with a first degree murder charge, it's got to be without a shadow of a doubt. And they're like the ultimate, great casters of that doubt. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really good.
But I think that just goes back to the fact that everybody lied.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody lied. It wasn't just Casey. It wasn't just her dad. The mom lied. It never ended, which is why I'm like, why were you only looking at her? And I'm not saying put her aside and stop looking at her. I'm saying look at all of them. Mm-hmm. They were all messed up, in my opinion. They had so many secrets, and that has to make you wonder, what else are they hiding?
Yeah, it is insane to think about what else they are hiding and what the real truth is, and it's one of the things we'll probably never know the truth.
No, because it's too late. That's what I'm saying. If they would have, instead of being so stuck in their own mind, well, we're right, and if they would have looked into George and possibly the mom, even though I don't really think that would have been necessary, that's when the evidence was there. That's when you could have done that. You're done now. Everything's gone. It's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the case itself, they completely left out George, and let's get into George a little bit. He was an interesting person because he was a former policeman, so he knows they really did. They were really pushing it hard that he knows exactly what to do and how to get away with it and exactly what to say and what to feed into her mind. And
but I think he did.
I personally think that there was that as well.
Because if you think about it, okay, when you have an abuser and a victim, that's, for one, I'm not saying that in this situation that's the case, but that is all you need to justify some of the things that were done. An abuser would convince a victim to lie for them. And if her entire life she was lying for George, that would continue into this situation. Mm-hmm. So one could argue okay, this happened, and then she acted like nothing mattered for 31 days. But when you hear that her dad told her to, or she's alleging that, then it's kind of like it makes sense to me because of what she says about what happened to her and what he did to her
Mm-hmm.
from such a young age. That's a trauma response. She shut down because dad told her to. Because everyone was saying, why did she leave and go to her boyfriend's house the second she found out Kaylee was missing? Dad told her to. Dad told her, do what you've been doing. Keep telling your mom what you've been telling your mom. And which goes along with the nanny lie, because she was lying about the nanny to her mom long before Kaylee disappeared, because she says that she wanted to take Kaylee when she would go see her friends, and her mom wouldn't let her. And she got sick of her mom controlling her. So she would say, I'm going to drop Kaylee off at the nanny's, and then I'm going to go meet my friends, when in reality, she was just going to go meet her friends and have Kaylee with her at the same time. So when he said, Kaylee's going to be okay, tell your mom what you've been telling her, that's where the nanny lie comes into play.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like this whole thing is so bizarre. There's so many things that just don't add up. And
the what happened of that day, I don't think will ever be able to be clear, because there's too many holes where it's like, okay, well, this happened, but that could mean this or that. Like they said about how he clocked in at 3:01 p.m. Someone else could have clocked in for him.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's not, and he could have, in the scenario, they claim, Casey claims that he was outside with Casey when they were searching for Kaylee, and he came around the corner at one point around the house and just had Kaylee in his arms. She held Kaylee,
Mm-hmm.
claims that she was cold and wet, I believe, which...
Mm-hmm. Cold, wet, heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me sidebar for a second. I'm not a parent, but I feel like regardless, like if something's wrong with your child, especially if they passed away. If you're holding them in your arms, whether you want to believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
So like for sure, I think she was lying about that, saying that she thinks that Kaylee's okay. I don't think that she thinks she is lying. I think that she truly believes that now, because she can't live with it if she doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But she for sure, you had to have known. But he said, give her back to me. She's going to be okay. And then that's that. He could have easily went to work after that.
Yeah.
And then decided what he was going to do, later. Like, we don't know.
We don't
like,
know.
And then they split off there, and then they don't really reconvene about the whole situation again. So, my opinion, the whole, the car smelled like this and that and blah, 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 all of those things could have been calculated by him.
Mm-hmm.
If you break it down. They all could have been. And the fact of, like, the argument of Casey just didn't want to have a kid anymore, and she wanted to be a mom she wanted to be a person without a kid that could just go out and do whatever she wanted. If she killed her child on purpose, I don't think that she would put it 15 houses down. Sorry. I don't think that she would bury Kaylee 15 houses down if she didn't want to get caught. I think that when she got arrested for lying, George was like, perfect. I'm going to get off scot-free. I'll put her here, and then they'll definitely find her, and then we're good. Because you're not a star witness in the case against your kid, and for your kid to get on death row, unless they have something on you that you would hope to go with them and to never be told.
Yeah, and that's where I think that they are accomplices together. And I think that I think that the truth lies in there, and that I think something happened to her, whether or not that George did it to her, like they allude to in the documentary, that, he smothered her or whatever, or the pool idea. I think that, him walking around the corner and carrying her, that might have been a thing, and they might have panicked, and they were like, well, what do we do? And well, she's already dead, and I think that's where the panic set in, and they split off. That's kind of probably what would have happened, and they create a situation where they were. What I'm trying to say is that the truth will probably never, like what we're saying, the truth will never be known, because they've probably created a situation in their own minds over time where they've told the same story 100 times and they've probably changed it to better themselves. It's kind of like the old tell a friend, tell a graph, tell a wrestler type thing. Like, you start a story and that story will never ever be the same story ever again.
But the thing is, though, is like their story isn't changing a ton. It does change some, but the overall gist of it, hers is George did it,
Mm-hmm.
and his is Casey did it.
Mm-hmm.
But neither of their stories fully make sense because
Right.
they both know that in order for it to all make sense, they both have to go down.
Yeah.
They cannot tell the whole truth about themselves or about the other person without them both being at fault, because that's the only way it makes sense. That's why neither of their stories make sense, because
Mhm.
they cannot tell the whole truth. And like the whole thing that they like, I cannot believe that they didn't even talk about it, was the fact that George tried to commit suicide while all of this is going on. Like, that to me is like red flag. Yeah, you're guilty. Like, why else would you be just ending your life? And I can understand, he's going through it, obviously, if he is the mourning grandfather, but his note didn't even make any sense. His suicide note was like, I really don't know. At one point he said, I'm going to be with Kaylee. It was only a few sentences. I'm going to be with Kaylee. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know where she went or what happened. And then it was, I miss her, and then I love you, Cindy. And it was like, why? If you are writing a suicide letter that you literally think this is it, this is the last, these are my last words, yeah, that's not what you put in there. Like, in my opinion, that's just not, that doesn't really cover everything you would think. And then the interview with Dr. Oz, where he's like, I just want to apologize for what I did to my family. Now, when he first said that, when he said, I want to apologize for what I did wrong and how I hurt the family, I thought he was talking about the abuse to Casey. Right. That's what I thought. But then Cindy looks at him and is like, what are you talking about? It was an accident. And I'm like, wait a second. Did you guys have discussions about how it was an accident? And because I didn't think he was talking about Kaylee. I thought he was talking about the trauma. And then she brings up it was an accident. She's talking about Kaylee.
So she knows too.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they all know it, and they're all guilty, and they all hate and despise each other. It's so the only reason that they would all hate and despise each other is because that they all know the truth. And
they just want to put it on each other because
right.
Clearly that it's a family of lies. Like, they've always.
Yeah.
Before and after. They're still continuing to lie. First Cindy said the car did smell like a body, and then it smelled like pizza. Like, I'm sorry. Just no. You're a nurse. Figure it out. Pick a side and sit there, and don't change your mind on it.
Yeah, and then the dad with the George in the eulogy part, that was disgusting. That was purely disgusting. And then the other thing where the parents were on that interview and they were fighting together too, where George had stole the $60,000. Yeah. Like, there's so many red flags throughout this that, like, everyone puts the hate on Casey, and rightfully so. But I don't think that all three of them are as innocent as they claim to be. And I think that it is a entangled web of lies that all three of them know the truth, and they're not willing to go down for the other person. They're not going down for anything.
No.
It is.
Which is so disgusting because regardless, it is ultimately Kaylee lost her life. So, like, none of that other stuff matters anymore. Like, your innocence or your guilt, none of it matters anymore, because that's the only thing that matters, is that Kaylee's now gone. And everybody's arguing like
The saddest part of this whole thing is that they're really losing sight. The documentary lost sight from the very first scene, because this shouldn't be about Casey and getting her story out there. And that's what none of the documentaries about this should be about. It should be about Kaylee, the fact that this child lost her life, and it's all about pointing the finger and saying, well, it wasn't me, it was him, or I did this because of him, or vice versa. Like, it's all a lot of finger pointing, it's a lot of blame shifting, and the whole thing, like, this documentary did a really poor job of, yeah, like they didn't do a really good job at all of, like, saying, like, yes, like, this child died, it should be about her.
they were
And
not able to prove their point without being completely tone deaf.
right.
Because you can't continuously paint Casey as a victim without missing the point and missing the real victim. Like, the one thing I will say where they went wrong when they touched on the abuse is the fact that it almost felt like I was abused, being Casey, you
Mhm.
know, and that makes all of it okay.
Yeah,
And
that is literally how they did paint it.
it doesn't.
No,
It just doesn't.
makes it so much worse.
Yeah. Like, I get it. And what if that happened to her? That is awful. And rightfully so. She's a victim to that, but that does not make her the victim to this situation at all.
No,
There's one victim and that's it.
right. And the one thing that that was interesting that Casey did throughout, like, so she started when she talked about Kaylee, she started by, like, saying my daughter, and then it turned into my little girl, and then finally at the end she says Kaylee, but then whenever she's angry at the end she calls her a kid. So, like, she went through so many different phases, like, who, like, different ownerships of what
Yeah.
she was to her. Like, it was her daughter, then she was a girl, and then it was Kaylee, and then it was a kid. It was
Yeah.
really strange to see that, how it built and then it dipped off at the end.
Mhm.
Like why can't she just be like your Kaylee? Or, like, when you talk about your child, like, that's not something that normal people do. Like,
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't make sense of all of it. You can make sense of some of it, but there's things like that where it's like, that's not normal. You know what I mean? Does
Right.
that mean she killed her baby? No, not necessarily, but it means she played some type of a part in it that she doesn't want to talk about
mm-hmm.
because that just doesn't make sense. It's
Yeah.
too calculated. Her words were way too calculated.
Way too calculated. When they were sitting in the projector, well, with the projector in the room, do you remember that?
Yeah.
They felt like that whole thing felt staged. She was filmed completely differently. She sat completely differently. Her cadence of talking, like, that was totally different.
But I'll say it could just be a different time. Like, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, film differently and look differently. That could just be a different day or a different time of day. And, like, I know the body language video that you saw said one thing, but the one that I saw about that, at least where she was talking about the trauma,
mm-hmm.
not once did they pick up on any part of how she was lying.
Yeah, so I will say that I was more interested because I feel like I had a certain view of this, and I've already kind of shared my thoughts on it, that I think that all three of them, the parents and Kate and Casey, like, they all played a part in this. Like, they're all equally as guilty. And I wanted to know, like, from a body language perspective of, like, when could you actually physically tell when she was lying or not? Because
But they even say you can't.
you can't, because
Not
like, yeah,
definitely.
not definitely, because some of her mannerisms were trauma responses, and it's not like the video that I watched. It was on YouTube, and they were very honest and saying like we're not clinically like doctors and stuff like that. We just are body language experts. And they were kind of saying that, she did certain things that she would get angry and show her teeth, and she would get angry towards her father more, and she would do things where she would touch her hair, and that was more of like I'm trying to pull a fast, like I'm trying to like not a seductive thing, but that is like a.
But they also said it could
But
be a habit.
they said it could be a habit, right? Correct. That's where the weird part of like if you're trying to go outside and dive in more to like see like what I'm doing, the supplemental.
Yeah, but you can't hang your hat on body
You
language.
can't hang your hat
That's
on body.
why
right.
I'm saying it really doesn't matter. It doesn't, because you're never going to know anyways. You
Yeah.
could do the same thing with any of them.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I wanted to go out and look for, because you know me, like anytime I watch something, like I can't just watch that one thing,
Yeah.
and I have to figure out a little bit more. So I always take it a little too far there, like always in the
Well, I don't
end.
think that means you were taking it too far, but it's just hard because no matter what we watch or what we analyze or whose opinion, it's never going to be cut and dry.
Right, there's always going to be the blurred lines, and and again, we're never going to get the truth in. And not that I need the truth. I think we can all pretty much make our own assumption of what it is, and that's what we have to live with. And again, it's not about what did or did not happen. It's the fact that Kaylee lost her life in all this, and that's the sad part. But I would encourage everyone to get out there and watch this documentary if you want to. I would, if you're going to do it, completely go into it with an open mind. And tell us and let us know what you think. Did you have any other final thoughts or anything before we get out of here? Well, thank you again, Allison, for coming on the posse for another documentary.
Yeah, thanks for having me.